Warning: the following content may not be suitable for all listeners and contains crude humor that may be offensive to some. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Satire is Not Dead. Welcome to Satire is Not Dead. If you're rejoining me from last week, welcome back. If you're joining me for the first time, welcome. I am your host, Harvey. I don't know if you noticed, but I toned down the intro music after my voiceover because I have an ear for these things. And I just felt like, with my creativity... Okay, so I was advised in a very professional manner, as you just heard, to tone down the intro music. Also, I received an email from a representative of a publication that will remain unnamed, stating to refrain from using their material in my podcasts. I had been reading from a publication, and I was told by someone I've consulted with in mass communications he'd been in there for 20 years, who said, as long as you cite your source and the author, then it's fine. But I went ahead and submitted a request with this publication to use it, and they basically just sent me an email back saying, no, don't use it. You're not allowed to. So that's fine. I have to imagine that the request of the the creator of the content supersedes anything else. So I won't even try to pronounce or spell his name, because chances are I'd butcher it all to hell. But it looked like, if you've ever seen those magnetic alphabet that people put on their refrigerators so their kids can play with them and learn how to spell, it looked like some child who didn't know how to spell scrambled the whole bunch and then split them into two groups, and then you have this guy's name. I won't try to pronounce it, but I will say that there are two syllables I'm sure of, k and l, and you can kind of figure out the rest. Now, before I get started, this story is a true story. And I want to assure those that listen to this podcast that I'm not making light of the victims' deaths, but bringing to light the dumbass behavior of the person who perpetrated the crimes, and just kind of showcasing their stupid behavior and being the asshole that they are. So, with that being said, today we start in Dresden, Germany. Meet Laurent F. and his estranged wife, Marietta F. Laurent was a construction subcontractor and had been living in Dresden, the capital of the German state of Saxony, since 1992. His building firm had got into serious financial difficulties, and Dresden, being distinguished by the celebrated art museums and classic architecture of its reconstructed old town, and the city was basically going through a revitalization and restoration of sorts. It may have been one of the reasons he wasn't successful. Maybe he didn't have the skills to work in Dresden, because restoration and new construction are two totally different things. And 2 years ago, his wife moved out of the family home. To help supplement his company's shortfallings, he was arrested with a kilo of crystal meth while trying to smuggle it into the country from Poland. I think his drug smuggling situation actually precipitated his wife deciding to leave him. But according to legal documents, he increasingly blamed his ex-wife, for his troubles and wanted revenge, putting his twisted plot into action when the two children were staying with him. The prosecutor told the court he was acting out of revenge because his wife had separated from him and injured his self-esteem. Yeah, no shit, asshole. It's called divorce. Anytime you're on the receiving end of a breakup or divorce, whatever, your self-esteem is going to suffer somewhat. But this guy kind of took it to a whole new level. The Frenchman, identified only as 55-year-old Laurent F. because of local privacy laws where he lives, had put little Leo and Maya, ages 5 and 2 respectively, into bed to make it look like they were sleeping after blocking their tiny airways with industrial expanding foam after strangling them with his bare hands. By using the expanding foam, he wanted to make sure that nobody was able to resuscitate them at the last minute. If a person can do this to another person who is the most heinous person on earth, someone who has done nothing but evil deeds their entire lives, then there's something wrong with that person. But to be able to do this to your own children in this way, simply to spite an ex-wife, then that person has to have some very basic fundamental issues that are flawed beyond recognition. This guy was basically a time bomb ticking away over the years, and this divorce or separation, whatever it was simply a catalyst to these deep-seated leanings he had. But I'm not a shrink, so what do I know, right? I would like to have been the guard on duty the first time this piece of shit was booked in. I'd take him to his cell, and this is what he'd hear just before I'd slam the cell door. Yada-da-da-da-da. Just to totally fuck with him. Later, I'd bring him his first meal. Hi, Laurent, is it? Yeah, hey, you look a bit uncomfortable, a little anxious. I know being in here is stressful, so to help you relax, I thought I'd give you a housewarming gift of sorts. It's a spork, but a very special spork. You know, we can't give you jailbirds a full-fledged fork because you do something really silly and try to kill someone with it, right? Okay, so the spork is made by Smith & Wesson. Sound familiar? And what it is a spork that is shaped like a handgun, and the end of the barrel is shaped like a spork. But don't worry, it's just a novelty item. So what you do is scoop up some of those mashed potatoes with the spork. Go ahead, give it a try. Now bring the potatoes to your mouth and stop. You don't even have to put the potatoes in your mouth. You simply open your mouth and pull the trigger, and the spork puts it into your mouth for you. This thing is going to save you so much time and energy you won't believe it. Go ahead and pull the trigger. No, don't worry. I told you it's a novelty item, silly goose. So go ahead. It's going to be great. You're going to love it. All right, now, any of you other child killers and rapists need help eating your potatoes? No? I'd better not hear so much as a peep from you creeps for the rest of my shift. You got that? You! Across the hall. You look hungry. And I'd walk back to the office. And all the inmates are in their bunks, curled up in the fetal position with urine running off of their mattresses. It'd be cool if the warden was the warden from the Shawshank Redemption. He comes down to the cell block to check on the sodomites. And he's like, what happened to him? He fell. You know, it's the universal excuse for everything that happens in prison. He fell. Yes, sir, he sure as shit did. He took a bite of mashed taters and fell over on his face, and a hole blew out the back of his head. I think some taters even came out with the brains. Goddamnest thing I've ever seen. Huh. Okay. Write it up that way. Boom. There. Taxpayers' money saved. Just like that. Due process my ass. Just off these creeps. Alright, so then he telephoned his wife, identified only as 27-year-old Marietta F., of Senegalese descent from the Republic of Senegal. That's a country in West Africa. To bring some cuddly rabbit toys Maya had left at home. And here's where the story turns a corner. When she arrived, he refused to let her see the children, and after a scuffle, attempted to kill her by hitting her from behind with a heavy object. But get this, the blow was softened by a thick wig that prevented the blow from being fatal. I mean, what the fuck was this wig made out of? Kevlar? Or maybe it was one of those big, thick powdered wigs like the Founding Fathers wore. And when he hit her, a cloud of powder flew out of it. This reminds me of the scene from Psycho 2, where Norman kills his mother with a shovel while she's sipping tea. They're in the kitchen. Norman fixes her some tea, and he offers her a sandwich. And the scene is set up, and it's really done very poorly, but it's actually, was intended to be dark comedy. But this scenario reminds me of the way it went down here. She was sitting at this table. She's sipping some tea, and he walks behind her, and he offers her a sandwich, and she says, "No, thank you." And he says, You sure you won't have a sandwich? He picks up a shovel, and as she's sitting at the table, she dips her head down like to sip some tea, and he just lumberjack chops that shovel on top of her head so hard that the chair breaks from underneath her, and she goes all splayed out on the floor, dead, of course. And he just goes about his business and like it's no big deal. But that's what this scenario reminds me of. Now, this has nothing to do with this murder, but because my brain creates these cartoonish images in my mind at the mention of the powdered wigs, I've decided to do a little bit of reading on the origin of the powdered wigs. So around the time of Louis VIII, syphilis was apparently raging throughout Europe. One of the side effects of the STD was head sores and baldness. Waxy powdered wigs were used by the infected aristocrats to cover up their imperfections, but quickly became a fashion trend. As always is the case, those with money who could afford their own wigs followed suit, and soon everyone was wearing them. Most wigs were made of horse or goat hair and smelled so bad that they were powdered for a pleasing lavender or orange scent. Sure, the curled wigs were practical in terms of hiding imperfections, but men also shaved their heads so the wigs would fit properly. This had the unintended benefit of controlling lice, as the infested wigs could be removed and boiled and then restyled, killing the lice. Jesus Christ. This style reigned until the late 18th century, when natural hair came back into play. So here you have these distinguished group of men, like we see in the American historical paintings. King Louis was the one responsible for wearing these fucking ridiculous things. But in the paintings that we have of our founding fathers posing and conducting business, they were basically lice-ridden, disgusting people who slept around. But it's so ironic, they would shave their heads because they had lice, but they would also wear the wigs that were crawling with lice. Imagine being in one of those meetings, posing for the paintings. I imagine the things would be a bit testy in these gatherings. If you had sores on your scalp, and remember, there was no air conditioning in this era, it had to be very uncomfortable with a goat hair wig rubbing against your sore freaking head, and would make for some pretty pissy attitudes. So anyway, I digress. So Laurent then continued trying to attack her, strangling her as she tried to make it to the entrance to the building, where she collapsed unconscious. He was then disturbed by witnesses that were also his neighbors. When the neighbors tried to awaken the children, they at first thought they were sleeping. And when they realized that they were not breathing and tried to resuscitate them, they discovered their mouths were filled with construction foam. Laurent only admitted killing his children once the trial was already underway. On the day of the murders, Laurent took pictures of his children, Leo and Maya, holding an ice cream. An expert testimony, which was rejected by the defense, alleged that the action was designed to cause the maximum damage to his wife. He was found guilty of 2 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder for the attack on his ex-wife. A psychologist found Laurent was an aggressive narcissist who showed a lack of empathy, but he was found fit to stand trial. Laurent's other previous offenses included rape and arson. And were those not red flags enough to tip these dummies off? And here's the kicker. He will have to serve at least 20 years in prison. So that means at age 75, he could conceivably walk free someday for killing his own children in such an evil manner. What the fuck? People have been doing stupid stuff for a long time. And they were doing it way before I was even born, or any of us, as a matter of fact. And just to prove it, there was this story. In 1930, apparently, there was a tree-sitting fad sweeping America. And any of you that listen to badmouth video games, I want you to pay attention to this, because this proves that Video games aren't as bad as everyone says they are. Thousands of American boys were gripped by a fad for sitting in trees, competing for bragging rights to see who could remain on a branch the longest. Here these wholesome young boys climbing trees, competing to see who could sit in the fucking tree the longest. Whatever. Tree sitting endurance records quickly grew to hundreds of hours as tree sitters were assisted by ground crews who brought them food and supplies. The fad lasted several months until boys began falling out of trees and one broke his neck. Also, in October 1932, a Seattle woman complained to the phone company that her phone never rang, but added that she knew whenever someone was trying to call her because her dog would howl in the yard. The repairman investigated and soon located the problem. There was a short in the line, and the dog was chained to the ground line. People have been stupid since the beginning of time, so, today's events and occurrences are no exception. It's just that back then it wasn't as widely circulated and you didn't know about it as soon as it happened. In 1934, Mrs. Lloyd B. Copley, a telegraph operator, testified in a Superior Court case that when I was sleeping, my husband thought I was snoring in Morse code to signal someone outside. Driven to a jealous rage by this belief, the husband pounced on his wife with all fours, blackening her eyes and beating her. So the judge took the case under advisement. Under advisement. He didn't do anything about it. He just took it under advisement. 1934. So you could beat the shit out of your wife and just basically, they'll think about doing something about it. Whatever. In November of 1950, a farmer in Lüneburg, Germany, reported that a number of his chickens had exploded with a loud bang while running across the barnyard. Investigators concluded that the chickens must have eaten bits of carbide left behind by Allied soldiers during recent maneuvers. When the carbide combined with water in their stomachs, the resulting gas caused them to blow up. In November 1955, in Jonesboro, Arkansas, a woman pulled into a gas station and whispered to the attendant that she suspected the guy behind her, who had been following her closely, was drunk. The guy behind her, it turned out, was a driverless pickup truck, its bumper locked with the woman's rear bumper. Police charged the woman with driving while intoxicated. A long time ago, when I was a kid, every vehicle had a ball hitch of some sort on the backside, and the front bumper on all these vehicles were at just the right level to where if you bumped them, the bumper would slip over the ball and they would basically be hitched. And you had to, I remember there were guys who'd stand on the bumper of the car that had the ball hitch and jump up and down on the car to try and unhitch the goddamn things. But that's what that was all about. Because, back then, every part of the car was made of steel. There was no plastic wrapping and all this bullshit that we have today. So there was a lot of people who didn't know how to parallel park would, run into the back of some other vehicle and, get lodged up on the ball hitch of the vehicle in front of them, and then they'd be stuck. And finally, back to this day and age, a couple of men who wore a watermelon on their heads while stealing from a convenience store have been arrested. The two suspects were from Louisa, Virginia, and yes, they were actual people with watermelons on their head. It caused quite a stir after they used watermelons as face masks to allegedly steal from a convenience store in a small Virginia town. The duo pulled up in a lifted 2006 black Toyota Tacoma pickup truck and entered a sheet store in Louisa on May 5 while wearing carved-out watermelons with holes cut out for their eyes, according to the Louisa Police Department. One of the two suspects was arrested on Friday, and police are still looking for the second suspect. But one of the guys approached an employee at the store, and they said, "So what's up with the mask?" And this was his words: "It the corona mask." The 20-year-old suspect who was arrested has been charged with wearing a mask in public while committing larceny, underage possession of alcohol, and petty larceny of alcohol. This is definitely not something you see very often in Louisa. A customer said, "We're a really nice, quiet town with a lot of hardworking people, and something like this is pretty unusual." The customer told reporters she thought using melons as face masks is ridiculous. Really? You think so? The amount of work that you have to do to actually hollow out a watermelon to stick it on your head, I think, is kind of crazy, she said. Why? Why would they do that? It's so stupid. So there you have it. For this Monday, June 1st. Can you imagine we're already halfway through the year? Unbelievable. Please, if you like what you're hearing, download, share, like, tell your friends about Satire is Not Dead, and you can also find my podcast on Spotify. I'd like to hear from those that listened in the comments section, so please leave a comment. My name is Harvey, the host of Satire is Not Dead, and I will see you 1 week from today. Thank you all for joining me, and have a great day.